Good evening. Right now, there are major developments in fighting voter fraud happening across Wisconsin, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. These are the things that will determine the future of this republic. Let's go through them together, and then afterwards discuss how big tech giants like Google are suppressing any meaningful discussion of voter fraud in this country. Actually, come to think of it, isn't YouTube owned by Google? This is your 2020 election update, and I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Now let's begin our discussion with the biggest story of the day. Earlier today, a judge in Pennsylvania ordered state officials to not certify the results of the 2020 election until after the court holds a hearing on an election contest on Friday. So this judge, who's a woman named Patricia McCullough, she not only ordered the state to not certify the presidential race, but she also blocked the certification of every other election result in the entire state of Pennsylvania as well. So why exactly is she doing this? Well, she is currently presiding over a lawsuit brought forth by Republicans, which alleges that Pennsylvania's vote-by-mail statute, something named Act 77, is in violation of the state's constitution. The lawsuit states that Act 77 was the most expansive and fundamental change to the Pennsylvania voting code, and that it was implemented illegally. And so basically, here's what happened. When Pennsylvania announced yesterday that it was going to certify the election results, the plaintiffs in this case who are fighting against Act 77, they filed an emergency request just before midnight, arguing that there was no need to be so fast. There was no need to rush, particularly with this legal challenge that's still in play. And so the judge accepted their emergency request, and now we'll be waiting until Friday, which is actually Black Friday, so I guess the courts will still be open in Pennsylvania, to see what happens in this case. We'll throw the links to the articles and the lawsuit in the description box below this video if you want to check it out for yourself. Now let's go on over to Wisconsin. But before we do, let's take a short trip over to that like button that's below this video. Make sure you hit that like button because YouTube seems to be censoring videos which are like this, talking honestly about the election. And so you're hitting that like button might force the algorithm to share this video to thousands of more people and have the truth spread far and wide. Now let's really go over to Wisconsin, where a group there has filed an emergency petition with the Wisconsin Supreme Court after identifying 144 potentially fraudulent ballots. The group that's doing this is a public interest law firm called the Thomas More Society, and they said that they have identified over 150,000 potentially fraudulent ballots in Wisconsin. That's more than enough to call into question the validity of the state's reported election results. So their count includes 144,000 fraudulent votes and over 12,000 legal votes that were not counted. And just for your reference, over in Wisconsin, Biden is currently leading Trump by about only 20,000 votes. So these fines are major. But where do they actually come from? Well, the director of this group said that these discrepancies were a result of Wisconsin election officials' willful violation of state law. Kind of sounds like what's happening in Pennsylvania, actually. So one example that this group presented was that in Wisconsin, the state law there requires voters to present photo ID when requesting an absentee or a mail-in ballot, with the only exceptions to this law being voters who are either hospitalized or indefinitely confined because of age, physical illness, or infirmity. These researchers in Wisconsin found that nearly 100,000 people exploited this indefinite confinement exemption by citing COVID-19. Now, of course, people were confined to their homes because of COVID. So it would be interesting to actually dive into the details of each of these individual 100,000 people. Because even though on the surface it might make sense, because, when there's COVID, you might not be able to go out. But in my opinion, it's also a perfect opportunity for fraud. So besides this, the group also said that it found more than 10,000 Republican ballots that weren't counted at all. If you're interested in reading their entire 45-page report, we'll throw the link to it in the description box below this video. You can check it out for yourself. Now, we here at the Epoch Times, we actually reached out to the Wisconsin Elections Commission, but they told us that they did not have any comment on the matter. So now I guess all we can do is wait and see what the Wisconsin Supreme Court decides. Well, actually, that's not the only thing that we can do, because just a few days ago, President Trump's request for a partial recount in Wisconsin went ahead and has already been set into motion. The deadline for this completion is December 1st, which is in 5 or 6 days with the Thanksgiving holiday also in there. We'll let you know about any progress on that front as it becomes available. Now let's go over to Nevada. Even though there are still several ongoing lawsuits making their way through the courts there, the Nevada Supreme Court went ahead and decided to approve, sign, and certify the state's election results. They are now going to be sent to Nevada's governor, who's a Democrat, for confirmation. So these moves essentially certify Joe Biden as the winner in Nevada by about 33,000 votes. But among other things, the lawsuits that are still making their way through the Nevada courts allege widespread voter fraud, including one claim that 15,000 people who voted in Nevada also voted in other states. And yet amidst this, the 7 justices of the Nevada Supreme Court certified the election results. We reached out to the Trump campaign for comment, but they didn't immediately get back to us. but I can't imagine they're thrilled. As these lawsuits are making their way through the courts in Nevada, we'll keep you abreast of any developments as they're coming about, and we'll also throw the links to all of them in the description box below this video for you to check out for yourself. Now let's go over to Georgia, where we had a bombshell story published last night. Now, for a little bit of context, in case you forgot, Georgia right now is in the midst of their second recount at the request of the Trump campaign. And amidst this recount, according to a group that is analyzing the state's voter data, they found something super interesting. Thousands of people in Georgia registered and voted using the addresses of postal facilities or businesses. But when you look at these addresses on the piece of paper, they were made to seem like residential addresses. Wow. In a tweet, this researcher said that in Georgia, they've identified over 1,000 early or absentee votes cast by individuals whose registered addresses are in fact at post offices, at UPS, at FedEx locations, but they willfully disguised the box numbers as apartment, unit, etc. He also said that nearly everyone who disguised a postal facility as their residential address used an absentee ballot to vote. Now, according to Georgia's election law, the address of a person has to be where he actually permanently resides. And anyone who knowingly gives false information when registering as an elector can be charged with a felony and put in prison for up to 10 years or fined up to $100,000. That's according to that law. So it looks like the Georgia Treasury might be getting a lot of money from the fines in the near future. We actually reached out to the office of the Secretary of State in Georgia, but they didn't respond to us. And this group that's doing this research is not confining itself to Georgia alone. They also found the same thing happening over in Pennsylvania. Over there, they found 1,400 voters in Pennsylvania who listed a postal facility address as where they live, just like in Georgia. And beyond that, they looked into why large percentages of Republicans in Pennsylvania who requested an absentee ballot never returned it. And so what they did was that they actually picked up the phone and called over 1,000 Republicans in Pennsylvania who requested absentee ballots. And what they said was that nearly 42% of these people who they called did mail their ballots back. At least that's what they said. But when you look at the state data, it shows that these ballots were never received and never counted. And this is a huge, huge deal because there are over 160,000 of these uncounted mail-in ballots that were requested by Republicans in Pennsylvania but never returned. So what exactly happened to them? Why were they not counted? Well, we reached out to the Pennsylvania Secretary of State to see what was happening and get their comment on things, but they have not responded to us thus far. But what's even more shocking is that this researcher said that this problem is not only confined to Pennsylvania. They called Republican voters who requested absentee ballots but never returned them in other states as well. And here's what they found. In Arizona, 50% of these Republican voters said that they mailed their ballots back. In Georgia, it was 44%. In Michigan, 33%. And in Wisconsin, 20%. But when these researchers looked at the actual data in these states, they found that these ballots were never received and never counted. How could so many Republican votes be lost? I mean, it doesn't even seem real that many votes can be lost in the mail. Because if you told me that maybe 5% of votes get lost in the mail, okay, maybe 7%, I would still believe you. But 44% in Georgia, 42% in Pennsylvania? It just doesn't make any sense. Now, we'll throw the links with the data from these researchers into the description box below this video for you to check out for yourself. And I would highly recommend that you dive into it because it goes into so much detail. Now, let's take a moment to discuss the power of the media in influencing elections. A recent survey was conducted across 7 battleground states, and they asked Joe Biden voters 2 questions. The first question was whether if they knew about the Hunter Biden scandals before the election, would they have changed their vote? And almost 10% of the respondents, 9.4% to be exact, said that they would. They said that if they knew about the Hunter Biden story, they would not have voted for Joe Biden. That is amazing. Now, the second question that they asked Joe Biden voters was whether if they knew about the Tara Reade sexual assault allegations against Joe Biden, would that change their mind? And 8.9% of them said that it would. Now, just from the survey alone, if you were to subtract the votes from the people who said that they would change their minds if they knew about these 2 stories, that would be enough to push Donald Trump to have 311 electoral votes, more than enough to re-elect him. Now, it does not matter what side of the political spectrum you fall on, because this is shocking on its face. A free and honest media is supposed to be the cornerstone of our republic. And yet right now, 90% of the news outlets in this country are controlled by only 6 corporations. And just look at what they're capable of doing. They killed the story of Hunter Biden, they killed the story of Tara Reade, and the American public had no idea. How do you know what you don't know? It's absolutely shameful. Now, it's not only the media outlets in this country doing this. According to Dr. Robert Epstein, who is a research psychologist, Google shifted, at a bare minimum, 6 million votes in this election by pushing their political agenda onto users. He said that unlike Yahoo, Bing, or DuckDuckGo, Google's search results were strongly biased in favor of liberals and Democrats. Now, earlier this month, our team actually sat down and spoke with Dr. Epstein, and he said that he found what seemed to be a smoking gun. That is, they found over a period of days when the vote reminder on Google's homepage was only being sent to liberals. Not one of their conservative field agents who they had recruited for this research received a vote reminder during those days. He said that if this kind of reminder was being used systematically over a period of time, it affected more than just who voted on election day. It also affected who sent in mail-in votes, and it affected who registered to vote, and so on. I mean, Google is the world's largest internet company with over 100,000 employees. They're ubiquitous. Everybody's using it. And according to this researcher, there is evidence that they are pushing people to vote Democrat. And is it just Google? Of course not. Just a month ago, Twitter censored anyone who shared the Hunter Biden story, which was a story of massive consequence, of potential corruption, foreign influence, pay-to-play tactics. And they essentially killed the story, such that if you ask someone on the street about Hunter Biden today, they might not even know what you're talking about. And that's exactly why a free and honest media is so important. Without knowing the truth, without knowing the facts of the situation, how can we be expected to make the decisions that our country needs us to make? And that's why I would highly recommend that you smash that like button that's below this video. That way the YouTube algorithm will be forced to share this video out to thousands of more people. Also, if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel because we will have some amazing investigations coming to you in the very near future. In fact, just yesterday, I spoke to one of our journalists and he's working on an amazing story about cash for votes. People buying votes with cash. So subscribe to the channel, look out for that story in the coming days, and until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed and stay free.